Good morning, everyone. Good evening in Israel. Good afternoon in the East Coast, and in the rest of the world, wherever you are. My name is Ophir Gutelson. I'm co-founder of Unacceptable, leading Unacceptable from the West Coast nationally. And today, I'm really honored to host Moshe Bogie Ya'alon, which we will refer to as Bogie. And for those of you who doesn't know Bogie, Bogie is the former IDF Chief of Staff and former Minister of Defense. If you don't know him, he is a deeply respected figure in the Israel security circle and political life, as well as here in the Jewish main organization. Outspoken advocate for Israeli democracy and a responsible leadership, and a voice of moral clarity in this time of crisis. Bogie, thank you so much for joining. It's an honor.
Thank you, Ophir, for organizing this meeting, and shalom to everybody. I'm here with you to share a couple of the observations regarding the challenges that we have to meet today. We, meaning the State of Israel, as well as the Jewish communities all over the world. No doubt that Israel today is engaged in the most significant crisis since its creation. The longest war since the 7th of October, more than a year and a half, without seeing the end of it, absorbing more than 1,800 casualties, thousands of injuries. Still thousands are evacuated from their homes in the north and in the south. And 59 hostages are still in captive at the end of the Hamas in the Gaza Strip. When we talk about this crisis, we have to go back to the 4th of January 23, the speech of our Minister Yariv Levin, declaring that the government, after the inauguration of the government at the time, decided to go to what they call judicial reform, actually was accepted by most of the democratic elements in Israel as a judicial revolution. That caused a wave of protest all over the country. I participated in it because I understood that we were cheated, talking about the elections campaign before January 23. This judicial reform, revolution, whatever, wasn't on the agenda. Not talking about the idea to change the character of the State of Israel from Jewish, democratic, liberal state, according to the spirit of the Declaration of Independence, to become dictatorship, theocracy, autocracy, based on Messianic ideology, which it is still the case today. Unfortunately, this government was created in order to crash the judicial system. Netanyahu, because of his personal interests, being indicted by the State of Israel in some criminal indictments, and later on facing the conclusion or recommendation of the National Commission dealing with the Meron disaster, in which 45 prayers lost their lives, and the National Commission decided to declare that he has personal responsibility to the death of the 35, not just himself, the chairman of the Knesset of today, Ohana, as well. And of course, the outcome of the International Commission dealing with submarines, the vessels, ThyssenKrupp affairs, and he decided to fight the judicial system. That was his interest. And he created an unbelievable coalition in which we have today ultra-Orthodox elements that don't want the Supreme Court to intervene in their state and religion affairs, as well as the issue of being drafted to the military. They reject to participate in the military service. And the most significant elements led by Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, two parties, Tzionut Datit and Otzma Yehudit, not accepting the whole idea of the democratic checks and balances, trying to crash the Supreme Court dominance in order to be able to even to commit what I claim are war crimes, or to do whatever they wish to do, whether it is in the Gaza Strip or in Judea and Samaria. I would like to concentrate on these two parties. The most influential rabbi in Israel, figure in Israel, is the Rabbi Dov Lior. These two parties are followers of Rabbi Dov Lior. He was the rabbi of the Jewish underground in the 80s, intending to blow up the Dome of the Rock in the Temple Mount in order to generate what they call Gog-Magog war, and then to be able to take over the Promised Land from the Euphrates to the Nile, and of course to clear this area from non-Jews and to settle it with Jews, and this will encourage the Messiah to come. This is the idea. They failed because of the Shin Bet success to foil their intention. Nevertheless, they tried again by the massacre in the Tomb of Patriarchs, perpetrated by Dr. Baruch Goldstein. 29 persons were killed at that time. Again, it didn't generate a Gog and Magog war, but it caused a rising wave of homicide bombing attacks led by Hamas. Nevertheless, they consider the 7th of October as a miracle. This is the way that talk about it. It is unbelievable for rational people, but they believe that the 7th of October is an opportunity to generate this Gog and Magog war, to take over the Promised Land. And that's why this government, in one hand, is not able to decide what will be the end of the war. They are not ready to decide it. They are against any ceasefire, whether it's in the Gaza Strip, even in Lebanon. That's why we haven't reached any ceasefire agreement, neither with Lebanon nor in Gaza, and they are ready to sacrifice the hostages. They are proudly declare that they successfully torpedoed all the efforts of releasing the hostages, and even now they claim the 59 remaining hostages are ready to sacrifice them for their ideology. Okay. That's in a nutshell the reason that Israel is stuck today in a very significant crisis, in which, in one hand, this government is going on with a judicial reform revolution. We witnessed today the clash between the government and the head of Shabak. Now with the Supreme Court, after yesterday meeting in the Supreme Court, discussing the resignation or the trying to push out the Shin Bet leader head.
We'll get to that in a second, into the Shin Bet. I want to, I mean, the background you just gave is super important for those who are just joining us. We just discussed the background of how did we get here. Couple of tweaks from messaging perspective. The Gog Magog that Moshe was talking about is what we call Armageddon here. and it's similar to what the evangelical are speaking about. And the Messianic movement is something that, again, I mean, here I learned it lately that Messianic is referred to more Chabad and others. In Israel, it's more like extreme Jewish supremacy groups. So just to give the context. Moshe, I just want to kind of like use your security expertise and credential. I hope they didn't take your security clearance yet, like they wanted to take from others, and ask you really about people are concerning about Israel's security in general, right? Iran, Hamas, Lebanon. Seven fronts, Houthis, you name it. In addition to the crisis to democracy, as a former defense minister and chief of staff, what is your assessment of Israel's security posture today?
Israel is situating in a very tough neighborhood in which most of the elements around us are not ready to accept our right to exist here in this region. Having said that, in a very unique way, based on a very rational way, we succeeded to sign peace agreements, strategic relations with Jordan from the 70s, 1970, then the peace accord with Jordan, 1994, the peace accord with Egypt, and Abraham Accords in the last years, in which we have official relationship with the Gulf states, also with North African states, to exclude today Saudi Arabia, which should have been part of the Gulf states, and Qatar, which is hostile entity for us. Of course, Iran is now on the first priority on the agenda, as Iran succeeded to build proxies to fight us, whether it's Hezbollah in Lebanon, certain Shia militias in the past from Syria, today from Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and although the Palestinians are Sunnis or not Shias, they decided to support Hamas as well as Palestinian Islamic Jihad because they are ready to confront us. Nevertheless, talking about the current situation after the 7th of October. First of all, the 7th of October, we failed. It was intelligence failure. It was a military failure. I have my explanation for it. It is connected to what we call now in Israel Qatargate, in which Qatar succeeded in deceiving our leadership to believe that by supporting Hamas, by financing Hamas with Qatari money, nothing will happen from the Gaza Strip. This is my explanation to the lack of readiness or even the early warning of the intelligence, military intelligence, as well as Shin Bet for the 7th of October massacre. Netanyahu was the leader of this strategy. For me, it was new. I served with him as a defense minister until May 16. I didn't hear from him that Hamas is an asset and the Palestinian Authority is liability, or we should strengthen Hamas, or we should allow Qatar to finance Hamas. And of course, this asset, Hamas, murdered our civilians, killed our soldiers on the 7th of October, not talking about some other atrocities. Nevertheless, the IDF, supported by Shin Bet and Mossad, reacted and responded after the first shock in a very impressive way, in which we succeeded to harm significantly Hamas in the Gaza Strip. I believe that we should have concluded the hostilities in the Gaza Strip, the war in the Gaza Strip on January 24, January 24, at the peak of our offensive, after releasing all our hostages on November, December, there was an opportunity which was unfortunately torpedoed by the government, and of course by replacing Hamas as a regime. This is a political conclusion of war, which is natural to myself. I served in uniform as well as defense minister. I haven't heard about going to war without deciding what should be the day after, or what should be the main goal of the war. Unfortunately, we missed that opportunity, and we still have now military activities. I don't see what is a goal of it, the objective of it, but ongoing activities now in Rafah, in other places, without concluding the war because of political rejection of those messianic elements. In the north, we have done it quite successfully, even in a very impressive way, although I thought that we should move to the north to fight Hezbollah on February, March, after concluding the offensive in the Gaza Strip on January. It was done on September, October, in a very impressive way. The beepers, the communication assets, the target killing of all leaders of Hezbollah in a couple of days, to include Hassan Nasrallah, his successor. And in 48 hours, the IDF destroyed 3,000 strategic targets in Lebanon. Very impressive capabilities, a combination of precise ammunition as well as intelligence superiority, very impressive. At that point, in this case in October, we should have accepted the Biden-Macron proposal to have to discuss ceasefire. At that time, Hezbollah was almost forced to be disarmed by the Druze, led by Junbalat, by the Christians, led by Samir Jaja, and some other leaders of the sectors in Lebanon. We missed that opportunity again because Ben-Gvir, in this case, the Minister Ben-Gvir, part of the messianic elements in the government, told Netanyahu, if you're going to be engaged in any ceasefire discussions, I'm going to leave the coalition and you will not be the prime minister. And we are still stuck in Lebanon without reaching any agreement. Later on, of course, the developments were in Syria, not talking about the options and the opportunities. Today, Turkey and Qatar exploited the vacuum in Syria, and today we have in Syria hostile elements, jihadists. Turkey and Qatar are not in favor of us. I thought that we should exploit this situation in order to bring in Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, the moderate Arab camp, which Biden raised immediately after the 7th of October, and even President Trump proposed now to have a kind of a camp, Israel and the Sunni Arab camp, the moderates, to exclude Qatar, of course, and not to allow Iran to be part of it. And it will be an axis, a moderate axis against Iran, against Russian influence, against Chinese influence, not talking about the jihadists in the region. We missed the opportunity because of our political complexities in which these two elements, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, threatened Netanyahu to leave the coalition and to lose his primaryship.
Bogie,
So when we are talking about the current situation, Iran is still on the top of the agenda, but they don't have Hezbollah's proxies, they don't have Shia militias in Syria, they still have the Houthis, and they use the Houthis in order to target vessels in the Red Sea, not just Israeli vessels. We don't deploy now Israeli vessels in the Red Sea. It's very harmful to Egypt, talking about the Suez Canal, not talking about other countries, to include the United States. And there is now a coalition led by the United States targeting and offending the Houthis because of their activities. We absorb in every few days a missile on the way to Israel, but we have very significant defensive capabilities, the Arrow 2, the Arrow 3, so they don't reach our country. In the current situation, this is a new era in which we should decide what are the Israeli interests. And I believe that the Israeli and American interests are in common. First of all, to deal with Iran, not to allow Iran to become a military nuclear state. Now we witnessed the meeting between President Trump and Netanyahu, in which Netanyahu was surprised from Trump's declaration about the direct engagement negotiations between the US and Iran, starting on coming Saturday in Oman. Let's wait and see what will come out of it. Our common goal, talking about the United States and the State of Israel, Iran shouldn't be military nuclear by one way or another. Nevertheless, talking about the current situation, I believe that we should conclude the war in Gaza after releasing the hostages. It is a moral issue. It's not just a matter of interest to abandon 59 Israelis, 24 of them are alive, the entire are dead, unfortunately. Part of them were killed by our activities, military activities, of course, incidentally, but it was so clear from the very beginning that if we are going to launch an offensive on the Gaza Strip, we might kill our hostages as well, and it happened, unfortunately. Part of them were murdered by the Hamas terrorists, and a few of them died because of the situation. Nevertheless, we should replace Hamas by another government. And the idea which was proposed at the beginning by President Biden on the 17th of October, 23, 10 days after the massacre, he came to our country, first of all, say don't to our neighboring enemies, and deployed 2 fleets of aircraft carriers, not to allow them to think about attacking us at that time. And on the 17th of October, he participated in unprecedented way in our cabinet meeting, proposing the idea of replacing Hamas, releasing the hostages, to put a rational goal to conclude the war, of course, in the Gaza Strip, but he was rejected by the government at that time. I hope that President Trump now will propose again a rational goal in order to conclude the war over there and to be able to cease the fire in Lebanon, to reach any kind of agreement with the new Lebanese government led by the new president, Joseph Aoun, disarming Hezbollah and not just pushing them to the north to the Litani. And of course, trying to settle the situation in Syria, which is very dangerous now when Turkey and Qatar are dominating elements in Syria.
Moshe, I want to take an angle here. We talked about security, I mean, like the reference to democracy, the judicial overall. And we are 30 minutes into the call, and I want to raise the 59 hostages that are still in Gaza, and to try and understand, and you mentioned a couple of times that you used very powerful language, such as ethnic cleansing, to describe what happens in Gaza right now. And I want to kind of like use that to understand, to help our audience understand why the hostages are not back. why the war is not ending, why we are in situation where that we are in a point of time where it's another freedom's Passover Seder that we're going to make, and they are not home yet. We are working really hard to send messages here to everyone. But it seems like, again, everything is going back. All the illness that you call them the Messianic movement, or we call it the extreme Judaism in Israel, is somehow ending up with our hostages not coming back, and we are trying to get more time to conquer Gaza. How does it all connect together?
It is very simple to understand if you overcome the irrationality of these messianic elements. All of it is because of their ideology, of the messianic ideology. They rejected even the release of the women and the kid at the beginning. And actually, Prime Minister Netanyahu is threatened by Smotrich and Bogie, the two significant parties in his coalition, that if he will seize the fire and release the hostages, he will be the prime minister. Very clear, very simple to understand. Now, as I mentioned, they want an ongoing war, endless war, to be able to implement their ideology of the promised land from the Euphrates to the Nile. Now, in order to do what they believe in, not to allow non-Jews to live in this piece of land, they started in the northern part of Gaza, what I call ethnic cleansing. If you hear Israeli ministers saying, Israel should, Gaza Strip should be cleared from Arabs and should be settled by Jews, I don't know any other definition rather than ethnic cleansing. Now, I didn't blame the soldiers. Actually, to be precise, I got messages from officers on the ground saying, you know, in one hand, we are ordered to clear the area from the Gazans, from the Arabs. Now, we believe that it was done because of operational considerations, and it might be not the way that it was done. But in order to avoid non-involved casualties, you are even demanded to clear the area for a while and then to allow them to go back to their homes. But in this case, they were ordered to clear all the area from Arabs, and bulldozers came to destroy their houses, and the minister declared at the end, Gaza will be without Arabs and will settle with Jews. So these declarations put the officers in a situation that they will be blamed as war criminals. That's why I came out to save the officers and the soldiers on the ground. And I'm glad that my public statement about it stopped the activities. Nevertheless, this is the idea. And nowadays, again, Ben-Gvir conditionally came back to the coalition. He left the coalition for a while because he understood that because of Trump, Israel was forced to release the hostages. So he left the coalition because of that. Smotrich decided to stay. Nevertheless, the Ben-Gvir conditions to come back to join the coalition was that to renew the offensive that has been done for Wayne. There's no reason to renew the offensive. What is the objective? And of course, to get rid of the Attorney General and the head of the Shin Bet, and that's what we witness now. All of it is because of the dominance of Messianic ideology in this government and the dependence of Netanyahu on those elements to stay as prime minister. And he's ready to sacrifice Israeli interests for keeping the coalition. You know, recently, most of the former chief of staffs, the commissioners of police, the heads of Mossad, Shabak, and military intelligence, we declared the declaration. that Netanyahu's conduct poses a clear and immediate danger to Israel's security and future as a Jewish democratic state. Very clear. This is the case, Ophir.
And that's bring us to the point where I just want to mention that we have just learned that unlike the Biden administration, the Trump administration invited first-time Ben Gvir as an official visitor, and he will arrive on April 20 to the States, hosted also by Chabad and others. We will craft a message about that, and we want to make sure you all be on top of that and send the right messages to the right people. And I would want to invite you to let us know if you know of any of those events and stay in touch on that, because that's really, really unacceptable. I want to take you, Bogie, to another thought that is coming up really often. I mean, like, American Jews have heard now for more than almost 2 years that Israel is on the verge of dictatorship. Which some of us call messianic theocracy, or others. Again, it's Jewish extremism. I mean, like, we are in this moment where we can keep talking about describing the state of Israeli democracy right now. But I'm wondering if it's, to your point of view, if we are already past this notion. I mean, like, we are seeing blunt statement by the government that they will not follow Supreme Court orders and ruling. And is that, and we are seeing some of the people in the army not following the general idea of the IDF to be very do what we should do. I mean, like, protect Israel. At what point of time do we feel like we are passing this line, or did we pass the line and we are now basically not just fighting to save Israeli democracy, but we are fighting a dictatorship in another way?
Israel is on the way to become messianic dictatorship, racist, fascist, corrupt, failed. You know, if I look back, I fought for the defense of the Jewish democratic liberal state according to the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. And we proved that that way brought us to as a position in which, with ups and downs, but generally speaking, we strengthen our security. We strengthen our flourishing economy. We strengthen the relationship between us and our neighboring countries who are our enemies. I fought against the Egyptians, the Jordanians. I fought against them. And now they are my friends. I know General Assisi when he was a defense minister. Today is my counterpart at that time. Today is the president, King Abdullah of Jordan, and his father, King Hussein. I have a very good relationship with Jordanian retired generals and so forth. The whole idea of being part of the Middle East was going back to the thinking of even Jabotinsky when he spoke about the Iron Wall. What was the idea of the Iron Wall? That we, Israel, we are so tiny. We are not able to eliminate, to defeat all our enemies to the last of them. No chance. So we should be ready to defend ourselves, to conclude any wave of hostilities in the upper hand, enjoying the upper hand, and signing agreements with the moderates, defeating the extremists and having relationship with the moderates. I'm not sure that the Egyptians are in love with us, to say the least, the Jordanians, but we succeeded to create a relationship based on interest, and I am a great believer of interests. Now, since the beginning of this government term, we lost a lot in security, economy, the relationship with the neighboring country, not talking about the Western democracies and so forth. So it's so clear that we are going the wrong way. That's why we said very clearly that Netanyahu's conduct poses a clear and immediate danger to Israel's security and future as a Jewish democratic state. Now, what we witness today, these days, there was an investigation in the Prime Minister office regarding a leak of a document which was connected to the hostages issue, the leak of document, very top secret document to the Bild. And what was exposed in this investigation, that in the Prime Minister office were 3 guys financed by Qatar, even after the 7th of October, till now. Financed by Qatar. Part of them didn't pass the security examinations. And they were deployed in the Prime Minister office, financed by Qatar. Unbelievable. Even if they were financed by the United States, it should have been investigated. We call it an influence agent. To be financed by Qatar, the supporters of Muslim Brotherhood, supporters for Hamas, willing to eliminate the state of Israel. So this is a big issue. And when Shin Bet exposed it, Prime Minister Netanyahu decided to get rid of the head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. Instead of getting rid of them, they are still employed in his. Part of them are now under arrest. But instead of saying, as a reasonable Prime Minister, wow, I didn't know about it, you should go out, and Shin Bet, you have to investigate it, he embraced them till now, and trying to get rid of the Shin Bet investigators. So when we are talking about Israel is in danger, is because of the current situation in which Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I know it for years, it wasn't in the past. It is a great change after being indicted, investigated, the National Commission's recommendation against him. He decided to survive as Prime Minister and care less about the interest of the state. This is the situation. So our democracy is in danger. You know, we feel like the police has been taken by Ben Gvir. Ben Gvir is the minister of the police. Unbelievable. I know him as an objective of terror. And now so something very wrong is going on now in our country. Now, I'm encouraged from the fact that when Israelis understood after January 24 that we were going to face a judicial revolution, the people went to the streets to protest without one leader. I call it a net of people based on the values that we were educated for. People went to the street to save the country. And we succeeded in a way to stop for a while the judicial revolution. Unfortunately, after the 7th of October, all of us, people myself, we went out against the external threat. I spent a lot of time in the Gaza, kibbutzim and moshavim, at the beginning to evacuate, then to support the farmers till now. They needed people, labor for the agriculture and so forth and so forth. In a couple of months ago, we decided to go back to the streets, understanding that the threat is from within. I claim very clearly, there is no existential threat for the state of Israel from the outside. There is an existential threat for the Jewish democratic state from inside because of this government. That's why we decided to go back to the streets, of course, to raise the issue of the hostages, to raise the issue of the war, but to raise the issue of democracy as a basic for the future of our country.
Moshe, how do you see the threat of the internal threat to Israel as a Jewish democratic state reflect the Jewish people in general?
I believe that we are in the same boat. I believe that we share common values, knowing very well Jewish communities all over the world. We all were educated according to the Jewish way, sanctity of life, equality, loving the human being. We are dependent on each other. All the Israelis are dependent on each other. That's the way that I was educated. That's why I decided to go to the military after Yom Kippur War to save the country, deciding to go on in my military service, and even after my
So while Bogie is
¿Me oyen los
joining
demás?
back, and David, take a
¿Sí?
look on the
Bueno,
when he
pues
joined back and adding to the
mientras
spotlight.
Bogie se
I
vuelve
want
a
to kind of like
conectar, David, por
say a
favor,
couple of
si
things.
puedes
One
estar
is
pendiente
that
de si se vuelve a incorporar.
you,
Quisiera compartir
I'm
un
going
par
to
de
raise again
cuestiones.
the concept,
En
the
primer lugar,
need to
quisiera
do whatever we
volver a
can to
plantear
make
un
sure that
concepto que me parece fundamental,
we
y es el
are,
siguiente.
David coined
Tenemos que hacer
use the
todo lo
Elisha Rabbi
posible.
point, like use the quarter of pita, like Elisha Rabbi said, to do
Como
whatever we
decía
can
Elisha
to
Rabbi,
raise
tenemos que
the
hacer
awareness
todo lo
that we need to end
posible
the war and
para
bring all the
que
hostages.
quede
So
claro que tenemos que
share,
poner fin a la guerra
like,
para que todos los
help us
rehenes puedan
translate if you
volver
can.
a casa.
That's super
Les pido
important.
que
The
por
second
favor
thing
nos
is,
ayuden
you know that there is
compartiendo,
the War Zionist
participando en
Congress is going
eventos,
on. There is 6
traduciendo,
slates,
si es
many of the
posible.
unacceptable people,
Además,
different people are different, in
sabemos
different
que
slates. I see Bogie is back.
parece que Bogie ya
You
está aquí
have
una vez
Aid, you
más.
have Tikva, you have Reform,
Hay
you have Anu, you
varios
have
movimientos,
Merkaz. So
Reform,
make sure
Tikva,
you
Agnum.
choose one
Hay
that you
toda
like
una serie
and
de
don't
movimientos que
give up
defienden
on
la
this option to
democracia,
vote,
y
please.
pido que por favor elijan unas de estas opciones
And
y
I
voten.
mean, we have
Voten para
a
el
link on the
Congreso
unacceptable page with all the 6
Sionista
slates
Mundial.
that we think that we know that we have friends there that supports Jewish and
Sabemos que
democratic state.
tenemos amigos ahí que apoyan
Bogie, you
un
are back.
Estado judío y democrático, y pido que por
yes, I
favor
am.
no dejen
Okay.
Do
pasar
you
esta
hear me?
oportunidad de
I
votar
can
por
hear
uno
you
de
and I
estos
can see you
grupos.
fine.
Okay.
Aquí está, le
So
oímos, le vemos
we were
perfectamente.
covering so we will continue where we stopped, where
Vamos a
we
seguir
talked
donde
about
nos habíamos quedado.
the influence of what's happening in
Estábamos
Israel
hablando de la
on
influencia
us
de lo que
here
está
as Israeli
sucediendo
and
en
Jewish in the
Israel,
diaspora around the world.
los judíos de la diáspora en todo el
I want
mundo.
us to take a
Y me
question
gustaría
that is keep raising is, you mentioned
plantear una pregunta
that the
que
protest
nos
moved back and we see
llega de
more and more
manera
people on the
reiterada.
streets.
Ha dicho que el movimiento de
But on the same
protesta
time, we
vuelve a
are
salir a la
having
calle,
hard
cada vez
time
hay
here
más
to
gente en la calle,
understand
¿no? Pero al mismo
why
tiempo
it looks,
aquí
as you
a
mentioned it
nosotros
as a
nos cuesta
net.
entender
I mean, and the question is like, is the
qué es este
protest and the
movimiento, ¿no?
opposition and the
Usted ha
people in the
dicho que es
opposition
una red.
understand the need to connect together,
Los
fight
partidos de la
together to win
oposición son
this,
conscientes de la importancia de crear
I mean, to bring
vínculos,
to
de
election and to
estar
win the
unidos,
election. Um,
de que se
and
celebren unas elecciones y de que ganen
and
ellos las
understand that
elecciones.
even people like you that was considered
Y que se
as
entienda que
right
incluso personas como
in
usted, a quien
Israel
se
are now
consideraba
considered
alguien
as
de
the enemy of the
derechas
state by the
en
government.
Israel, sin
So
ir
we
ahora
are
el
all in
gobierno
the
considera
same
que es un
boat in
enemigo del
that
Estado,
way.
que estamos
How do we
todos
get
en el
everyone
mismo
connected
barco.
together, and what
¿Cómo se
the
puede conseguir crear
people
esta
here
conexión
can
entre
do to
distintos
support not
sectores?
just
¿Y
a
qué podemos hacer
party,
los judíos
but
aquí para
support the fight
apoyarles?
for democracy,
No para apoyar a un
to
partido
make sure that
concreto, sino
Israel
para
stays Jewish in
apoyar la
democracy,
democracia,
not
para
just in a year, but
asegurarnos
in
de que
even in
Israel
year
sigue
100
siendo
and
una
going forward.
democracia no solamente dentro de un
I
año, sino
see
dentro
the
de
current
100
crisis
y en el
as an
futuro.
opportunity.
Bueno, yo
We
estoy
were
convencido de que
all
todas las
shocked
crisis son una
from what was
oportunidad.
happening in our country
Yo creo que todos nos
before the
quedamos en
7th
estado
of
de shock
October,
al ver
not
lo
talking
que
about
ha
after the
pasado en nuestro
7th
país.
of
Y no
October.
me refiero
And
incluso
in
a
the
lo
current
sucedido después del 7
situation,
de octubre, incluso antes del 7
the
de octubre.
lack of leadership
Vimos que en el país no
serving
había líderes
I decided to
reales,
go
faltaba
to become
liderazgo.
politician in order to save the country, not my bank
Y
account.
bueno,
And unfortunately, the
se
corrupt
supone que
way that
uno
this
quiere ser
government
líder
is
en un
leading
país
us
para pues beneficiar al país y no
caused
su propia cuenta
awakening.
bancaria, ¿no? Pero
And I believe,
desafortunadamente
according to the polls,
esto no ha sido
the
así
vast
y se
majority
generó una
of
gran
Israelis
decepción. De conformidad con las
are for
encuestas,
the
la gran mayoría
Jewish
de los
democratic
israelíes
state,
están a favor
not
de un
the
Estado judío
dictatorship, the
y
messianic
democrático y no de una dictadura
whatever.
mesiánica o
The
del
issue of
tipo
the
que sea.
Palestinians,
La
most
cuestión de
of
los
the Israelis
palestinos.
are for
La
separation.
mayoría de
And
los
I'm
israelíes
hawkish
están a
when it
favor
comes to the
de una
Palestinians. I'm not
separación.
naive.
Y yo no
And
soy
I was very
nada
critical. I'm very
iluso cuando hablo
critical
de
to
los
those who
palestinos.
believe in peace
Yo soy
now.
muy
But
crítico
I
y siempre he sido muy
agree with
crítico
peace now
de aquellos
that we
que
should
creen en esta idea de paz
have a
ahora.
separation between
Pero por
us
otro
and
lado,
the Palestinians,
entiendo
to
que
have
ellos
what
quieren una
Rabin
separación entre
called
nosotros y los
a
palestinos.
Palestinian
Como decía
political
Rabin,
entity.
debemos tener
Now we
una
have two
entidad política
entities.
palestina. Bueno, ahora tenemos
That's
dos,
why
¿no?
I support the idea of bringing
Este
the
es el
Palestinian
motivo por el
authorities
cual
to the Gaza
yo
Strip
estoy a
to
favor
replace
de que
Hamas.
las
Nevertheless,
autoridades
and not to
palestinas
annex or
vayan
to
a
occupy,
Gaza
to
a
annex,
sustituir
to
a
clear from
Hamas.
non-Jews and to settle
Pero
with
no
Jews.
podemos
I'm
anexar
against
el
it.
territorio,
So
no podemos
the
pues
distinction
eliminar de
between
allí a
right
todos
or
los que no sean
left
judíos y crear
should be
asentamientos
clarified in
judíos.
our
Yo
country.
creo que
Those who
sí
believe in Jewish
tiene que haber
democratic
una
rather than
diferencia entre la izquierda
dictatorship
y la derecha.
in one hand, and separation rather
Por
than
un lado están los
annexation and
que
ethnic
creen
cleansing and so
en la
forth. This
democracia
is the
y creen en la
line that
separación
should
en
be
lugar de
illustrated before the elections.
anexar
And when we
y
are talking about it, I can see
ser
a
responsables de una
coalition
limpieza
based
étnica.
on
Eso
the
es lo que
majority
hay que
according
dejar
to the
claro, ¿no? Esta
polls.
es la diferencia importante
Most
que
of
existe.
70%
Yo creo
of
que
the
sí que se puede
Israelis
crear
want
una
to
coalición.
conclude
Más del
with the war
70% de los
to
israelíes
release the
quieren que
hostages.
acabe la guerra y
More than
quieren que se
70%
libere
want the
a los rehenes.
ultra-Orthodox
Más
will
del
serve in the military.
70%
Most of the Israelis, more than
conocen a
70%,
personas que están
prefer
en el
Jewish
ejército.
democratic
La
state rather
mayoría
than
de los israelíes,
dictatorship.
más del
So I
70%,
can
prefieren una
imagine
democracia
a
a
coalition
una
after the election
dictadura.
with
O sea que
a
yo sí que
right
consigo imaginar una
liberal
coalición después de las
party,
elecciones donde haya
with
un partido
Likud
liberal
but
de
not Bibist,
derechas
with
que
religion
no sea
but not
pues, de
messianic
Bibi
people,
y que incluya la
and of
religión,
course all the
pero no
Zionist
incluya
parties
pues a los mesiánicos
like
y
Yesh
que
Atid of
que represente a
Lapid
todos los
and Machane
partidos
Mamlachti of Benny Gantz
sionistas
and
como de
Israel
Lapid,
Beitenu
el
of
partido de Lapid o de
Lieberman
Benny
and Zem
Gantz,
Demokratim of Yair
o
Golan
incluso de
and
Lieberman o
Mansour
de
Abbas.
Golan y Masur Abbas,
He is an Arab leader.
que es
He is
un
the
líder
first
árabe
Arab politician
y
in
que es el
Israel
primer
saying, I know
político
that I
árabe
live
de
in a
Israel
Jewish
que
and
dice,
democratic
yo
state
sé
and
que
I
yo vivo en
prefer it.
un estado judío y
And not
democrático
just
y es lo
democratic
que yo
state to believe
prefiero,
that the end it will
no
be Jewish,
solamente
like
un
Ahmed Tib.
estado
He
democrático
should be embraced
que
by
luego no
any
sea judío como
coalition.
Ahmed Tib.
You
O sea que
know,
él
the
tiene que
intention of the Israeli
incorporarse en
Arabs,
cualquier
and I talk with
coalición.
many of them. I
Yo
know
hablo con
very well Mansour
muchos
Abbas and
árabes
others, but
israelíes.
with regular people, to include this week,
Es
they want
importante
to
incluirles a
integrate in our
ellos
society.
porque se quieren
Few of
integrar en
them had
nuestra
become
sociedad.
terrorists.
Pocos de
They want to
ellos
integrate.
son
We have
terroristas o se han
Israeli
convertido en
Arab
terroristas.
doctors,
Quieren
nurses,
integrarse. Son
teachers,
médicos,
scientists, and so
son
forth. They want to be
científicos.
integrated to the society,
Quieren estar
and we
integrados en la
should embrace
sociedad
them rather
de
than
Israel. Y tenemos que
saying
recibirles con los brazos
death to
abiertos
the Arabs, like
en
Ben Gvir and
lugar
so forth.
de decir muerte a los
So,
árabes, como dice Ben Gvir.
this coalition
Por lo
might
tanto,
be 70 to 80
esta
mandates out
coalición
of 120.
podría
I
incluir a
believe that
70,
one of the first
80
steps of any coalition like that, learning the
políticos
lessons
de
of what we are
120.
witnessing today, is to have an
Yo creo que este
Israeli
tipo de
constitution.
coalición
We don't have a
serviría
constitution. We don't have
porque
checks and
después
balances in
también nos
our
permitiría crear
democracy.
una
We
constitución
don't have,
israelí. No
it is
tenemos
not
una
done.
constitución. No se ha
We
hecho.
don't have federal
No
federations.
tenemos
We don't
tampoco
have.
un Estado
So
federal.
what we still have a judicial system as
Lo que
checks and
tenemos es
balances
un
to
sistema
the
judicial que
legislative
es el
branch
que
and the
realiza un
government.
control de los
That's
otros
all what we
poderes
have,
del
and they try
Estado.
to destroy it in order to have
Y el
dictatorship.
gobierno ha intentado destruirlo
So that should
precisamente
be
porque
the
quieren imponer
situation
la
in the future.
dictadura.
And I believe
Esa debería
when
ser
we
la
talk
situación en
about
el
the
futuro.
relationship between
Y
the
si
state of
hablamos
Israel
de
and
la
the Jewish
relación entre el
communities all
Estado de
over the
Israel y
world,
las
on
comunidades
top of
judías
it,
en
the
todo el
United
mundo,
States.
más allá
Talking
de
about
Estados
our
Unidos, en el
shared
resto del mundo
values,
también, tenemos que
how
hablar de
to keep
nuestros
our
valores compartidos,
democracies,
de ver
how to
cómo
keep our
podemos
values
mantener nuestras
in our
democracias, cómo podemos
strategy,
mantener
policy,
nuestros
whatever.
valores en nuestras
There is a
estrategias
lot
y
to be
políticas,
done together
puesto
to
que
support the right
juntos
elements in Israel
podemos
and not to welcome Ben-Gvir in the United States as
alcanzar
an example.
grandes logros y
And
apoyar a los
I'm
elementos
optimistic
positivos para
because I
Israel. Yo
meet
soy
the
un
people on the
optimista
streets.
porque
They are
yo
highly
tengo
motivated.
contacto con la
Even
gente de
after
la
the
calle
7th of
y están
October, when we
motivadísimos,
lost
incluso
the
después de
power
lo que
of the
pasó el 7 de
protest because
octubre,
of the external
cuando
threat,
perdimos
people are
la
back to the
capacidad de
streets,
protesta por esta
believing that they have
amenaza
to save the country,
externa.
and they are ready to
Ahora la
sacrifice
gente
for it.
vuelve a pensar que tenemos que defender nuestro país y está dispuesta a
they are
realizar
ready to
sacrificios para
sacrifice for
ello.
it, and on the same time,
Dices
I mean,
que
like
están
we see the
dispuestos a
numbers
realizar
that are going to
sacrificios,
reserve,
pero al
basically
mismo
because of
tiempo
the reasons that you
vemos
mentioned of the ultra-Orthodox not coming to the army
el
and
número de
others. We are
reservistas, también los
seeing
motivos que has
those
mencionado, ¿no? De los
ideas
ultraortodoxos que no van al
that people
ejército.
are, I mean,
Sabemos
tired and not
que hay
and looking
muchas
forward
personas que
to
están
make sure that they are
cansadas,
serving
que están
the Jewish and
hartas
democratic state
y
and
que
not some
están
messianic
dispuestas solamente
ultra-Orthodox
a
corrupted
defender un Estado judío y democrático, pero no un
government.
sistema mesiánico ni un gobierno
And
corrupto.
that's a thing that we want both, I think, me and Bogie, for you
Esto es
to also
algo que
take to your
tanto yo
Seder
como Bogie
table. I mean, like,
quisiéramos pedirles a
and
todos
to make
ustedes
sure
que lo
that
lleven
you are not
a
trying to,
a su
when
mesa
you're sharing those
durante el
information,
Seder.
you feel very patriotic, very Zionist, and
Yo sé
very
que
supportive of
muchos
Israel.
somos muy
And that's
patrióticos,
something that we want
muchos
to make
pues
sure you take with you to the
defendemos
Seder.
Israel y
Bogie, I'm
somos
taking a couple of
sionistas y esto
questions
es
from the audience
importante,
that I have here in the chat.
pero pido que también lleven este
And
elemento, esta idea
many of them
al
are
Seder.
looking into the comparison in
Bogie,
from democracy fighting,
muchas
right? The security, I mean, we are
personas
facing also democracy issues here in the US. It's not
aquí en Estados Unidos se
a
están
secret.
enfrentando también a ciertas
And when you look
dificultades
into
a nivel de
democracy here,
democracia.
it's
Yo
much
creo que
stronger. We have
esto es
constitution, we have federal, we
sabido
have many
por
other
todos,
checks and
¿no?
balances.
Y aquí la
While in
democracia
Israel,
es
we have
mucho
one
más
check and
fuerte, es
balances,
un
which
Estado
is
federal,
the
hay
Supreme
una
Court.
constitución, hay toda una serie de
Do you see
mecanismos
any
para
way
ejercer un
that
cierto
those who
control
care about
de otros
democracy
poderes.
here, Jewish Americans and
Pero
non-Jewish Americans,
aquellos
help
que
and
creen en
fight
la
together for
democracia
democracy in
aquí,
Israel? Do
ya
you
sean
see any
judíos o no,
connections there in those fights?
pueden tal vez pues crear algún tipo de
I'm
alianza
a
para
great
defender la
believer in
democracia
democracy
tanto en Estados
rather
Unidos
than
como en Israel.
dictatorship. You
Yo
know,
creo
I'm a
firmemente en
son
la
of Holocaust
democracia.
survivor.
Yo no creo en
And
la
I,
dictadura.
you know,
Yo soy
from
hijo
my
de una
childhood,
superviviente
I
del
understood what
Holocausto.
is the right way,
Y yo, desde
what
muy
are the
niña,
right
entendí
values.
qué valores son los
Unfortunately,
realmente adecuados,
today,
cuál es el camino
in
a seguir.
2025,
Estamos en el
populism
año
has become
2025
very dominant in the political
y
culture,
vemos una
exploiting
actitud
the social
dominante
media
en la cultura
to
política
lie, to cheat, to
basada
manipulate.
en la
We call it in
autoridad. Se
Israel the
utilizan las redes
poisoning
sociales
machine,
para manejar,
which
para
is in use of the
manipular,
government.
para engañar.
You know,
Es una
according to the
máquina
poisoning
que
machine, I'm a
envenena todo, ¿no? Y
leftist
que está en manos
traitor.
de muchos gobiernos.
When it comes to security, I know where I was when where I am, and where was and is
Esto
Netanyahu. I
afecta a
was
la
his
seguridad
defense minister.
también.
But
Yo
today
conozco a
I'm
Netanyahu muy
a
bien. Yo fui
leftist and
ministro de
traitor.
defensa de su
It's very,
gobierno.
I tell them, you have to
Y ahora,
be very careful
Moshe, I think
when you
Moshe,
consume.
desafortunadamente la conexión
Just
no
a
está
second, I think
funcionando
your
muy
connection
bien.
is slowing
Do you hear
down.
me?
Moshe, creo
Okay, now we
que
can
la
hear you.
conexión no es buena. ¿Me oyen?
Okay.
Sí, ahora sí.
When I talk to
Bueno,
youngsters, I tell them you be
cuando hablo con
very
los jóvenes,
cautious and
les
very
digo que
careful
tienen que
while
ir con pies de
consuming
plomo, tienen que ser muy
materials
cautelosos
from the
a
social
la
media.
hora de
It's very
consumir
easy to say, it's very
los
difficult
contenidos
to
de las redes
distinguish
sociales,
between
porque es muy
right or
difícil
wrong,
distinguir entre
evil
lo
and so
correcto y
forth.
lo
So
incorrecto,
this is a challenge.
lo bueno y lo
I
malo.
you
Este
know,
es un gran
we have
desafío.
educated our kids now, our
Y
grandkids.
bueno,
This is the way
nosotros
to
educamos a
educate
nuestros
the young
hijos, ahora a nuestros
generation
nietos.
for keeping
Tenemos
the
que educar a los
democratic values.
jóvenes.
we are in common when
para
we
que
talk about
conozcan y defiendan los
challenges.
valores de la
And I believe
democracia.
when the Israeli
Claro que
democracy is
hay
strong,
dificultades y
it
desafíos.
will serve the Jewish communities
Yo desde luego estoy convencido de
strengths
que si
in
la
the United
democracia de
States and vice
Israel es
versa.
fuerte, esto va a ser
So we
positivo
should
para las
fight
comunidades
together.
judías en Estados Unidos y viceversa. O sea que sin
Great.
duda tenemos que estar
We
unidos.
are almost on time, and I will
Muchas
start to
gracias.
close.
Casi se
If
nos
you have
acaba
any
ya el
other
tiempo.
urgent question, you can send it to me
Voy a
on the
ir
chat.
acabando. Si alguien tiene una
We
pregunta urgente, me
are
la puede enviar por el chat.
want to again raise the point
Una
that
vez más,
59 of our hostages are still
quisiera
out there
recordar
in
que
Gaza,
59
kidnapped by
rehenes siguen
Hamas.
en Gaza.
24,
Están
20, I
secuestrados
think are
por
still
Hamas.
alive, and the rest
24
need to
creo
come
siguen
back
con
home
vida
for
y
proper
los demás
burial.
tienen que volver a
We
casa
have to
para que se
keep
les
up
pueda enterrar
working on
como se
that and
debe.
keep demanding
Tenemos
our
que seguir
leadership
trabajando
here,
para conseguirlo y
both on
tenemos
the
que seguir
government, on the
exigiendo a nuestros
administration, and both on our
responsables,
Jewish
a
leadership
nuestros
to
líderes
make sure
del
that they are
gobierno, pero
raising their
también a los
voice, not
líderes
just
de las
to
comunidades judías, que no se queden callados, que
the
alcen la
father of
voz.
Hersh Polin said, like,
Y como dijo el padre de Hersh
wearing
Polin,
the pin is not enough, right? I mean, like, you need
llevar
to
un pin
work
no es
for that,
bastante.
and that's why he said to
Hay
the
que hacer
government,
mucho
remove
más,
the
hay que
pin
seguir
if you don't believe
trabajando.
in ending the
Y
war
por
and
eso le
bringing them
dijo a
home.
los miembros del
So we need to
gobierno,
say it here as
quítense el
well.
pin
We
si
need to
no
talk
creen
about it
en
in our
poner fin a la
Seder,
guerra
and we
y
need to
en
vote for the
garantizar que
war
vuelvan
Zionist
a casa.
Congress,
Hay
and we
que
need to make
mencionarlo en
sure
el
that we
Seder
can
de
do whatever
Pesaj
we can.
y también tienen que hacerlo cuando voten
Bogie,
para
I
el
want to
Congreso
thank you again so
Mundial
much for being here. I
Sionista.
want everyone who joined
Bogie, muchísimas
to
gracias
take
una
this
vez
message
más por
out.
estar hoy aquí con
We'll send a
nosotros.
recording.
Gracias a todos los que
I
han
want to wish you a
participado.
happy
Por favor,
Passover as much as
compartan este
possible. Think
mensaje.
about the
Vamos a enviar la
freedom and
grabación.
think about democracy.
Disfruten en la medida posible
Bogie,
de
thank you so much.
Pesaj,
And your
pensando en
closing
la
word.
libertad y
My
en la
last
democracia. Y con esto, para concluir, te doy la palabra a ti,
words
Bogie.
about it. You know, talking about the hostages before the Passover Seder.
Hablar de
They
los
should have been
rehenes
with us
antes del
today.
Seder de Pesaj.
And actually, those who were released recently were released just because of President Trump's
Tendría que estar con
pressure.
nosotros, todos los rehenes.
Otherwise, as
Y a
I
los pocos
mentioned,
que se les ha
this
liberado
government
recientemente ha sido
is ready to
porque
sacrifice them.
Trump ejerció
Unbelievable.
mucha presión, porque
So
nuestro
if you
gobierno estaba
can
dispuesto a
put
sacrificarlos.
some pressure
Increíble.
in
Así que, por
Washington
favor,
in
si
order
pueden,
to
ejerzan
remind
presión
President
en
Trump that
Washington
we still
para
have
recordarle al
59 that should
presidente
be
Trump que
released.
quedan 59
It's
personas
one of the
que están
ways
esperando
to
a que se les
do the
libere.
right thing today.
Eso
And
sería
for all of us,
una cosa
I wish
positiva
to
que podríamos
everybody Chag
hacer hoy.
Sameach and
Y con
Kashem.
esto, Chag Sameach a todos.